Janice Brown.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Laurent with Capital Solar. I was asked to chat about heat pumps today. Am I on the right call?
Cool. Yep.
Okay. Hey, Deb. Yeah, I managed to connect to the Zoom call. No worries. Obviously not. And then I sent you also the one-page Excel sheet to the show. Yeah, at some point. I will send that a few minutes ago. No, and I should give you guys 10 minutes before you go in, that's great. Okay. Oh, I'll pop into it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deb. I'm leading us today in Alyssa's stead.
You're
Oh,
back.
hi, JD. I'm back.
You're back.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Hold on just a second. I'm going to put the notes here in the chat in just a second. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. So we have Laurent from Colorado Renewable Energy Society and Capital Solar Energy joining us here in a few minutes. And we'll be hearing from him on heat pumps. But I just wanted to give us a few minutes to say hi and introduce ourselves. I also wanted to just give a heads up that the meeting is being recorded, and hopefully that's okay with anyone. If you have an objection, let me know. But we're recording the meeting just so that other folks can access this later and learn about heat pumps too. It's great to see you all, especially those of you I haven't seen in a while. And all right, we'll get started in just a second. I'm going to drop the notes in the chat. Okay, so welcome everyone. Here are the notes for those who like to follow along that way. And I see Laurent is already here with the name of Charlotte, but that's okay. Hi, Laurent, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. All right, so for those who don't know me, I'm Deb, and I am the Development and Communications Director with 350 Colorado. And I used to facilitate these meetings in years past in my previous role. And I'm just filling in for Alyssa today. She ended up having a doctor's appointment that conflicted. So she passes along her greetings and she'll be back next time. So let's see. So Alyssa had put in just a little a warm-up question or intro question. What do you think the biggest barrier to renewable energy for the average American is? And maybe what we can do, let's just do super quick, introduce yourself. And if you want to say something in response to that about a barrier, please do. And then I'll be handing it over to Laurent, who will give us a little presentation and answer our questions. And I'll just quickly start. I know one of my barriers when I was trying to install a heat pump, and this I think was either this year or last year, it was really challenging because the installers seemed really resistant to doing it. And there were all of these problems like, oh, this part's going to take 5 months and that part takes 4 months. It was really interesting. So I feel like there are logistical barriers in our system, at least here in Boulder, at least with heat pumps. I'll just say that quickly. And I will pass it over to JT, and then JT, pass it on to someone else after you say hi.
Okay, great. Hi, it's JT Thompson from Boulder. I've been part of this group since kind of pre-pandemic. I would say the barrier is probably cost from a renewable standpoint. So, like a heat pump, as an example, I've got, a furnace that's working. And so, to replace it is an additional cost, kind of the same thing could be said about solar or cars, everything in that sense. So that would be my quick feedback there. I'll turn it over to Ron.
Thanks, JT. Hi, everyone. I'm Ron. I'm an architect. I'm in Boulder. And biggest barrier to me is cheap frack gas. Gas is just so cheap that it's hard to compete with that. Doesn't represent the true social cost. I'll pass it to Carl. Welcome, Carl.
Hello. I know a barrier for a lot of people with solar is their roof, assuming they want to put it on a roof in the first place, is shaded. In Boulder, a lot of people have big mature trees. I was just thinking about that yesterday on my bike, riding through some neighborhoods, kind of wondering to myself, why don't more people have solar? Well, I look around, most of these roofs are under a tree in the shade. So I think that's a big one, and a good argument for something like community solar, where a big array might go somewhere else, and then you buy into it. And who else? Who's Jan? Jan Brown, Janice Brown. I know Janice Brown, but I don't know if it's this one.
My name's Jan. I live in Inglewood. And I agree that it's cost right now. And I will pass it on to Ryan.
I assume that's me.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan.
The only Ryan. So I want to first say hello. This is my first time attending this meeting. I'm in largely unknown territory, so if I seemed intimidated, please forgive me. I'm also in a public space, so if you hear a bunch of background noise and think my sunglasses are ridiculous, it's okay. Yeah, my feeling is, I think, maybe a bit cultural. Like, the biggest obstacle is perhaps convenience combined with habit. And I think this is a little bit touches upon finances too. I mean, if somebody has something that they currently have that works, it's inconvenient to go pay extra money and put in extra time to get a new thing that works differently. Yeah, that's all I'll say for now. Has Amy?
Yeah, Amy, let's hear from you. Thanks, Ryan. Welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Amy. I've joined a few of these meetings in the past. Yeah, I think, well, cost is certainly a barrier, but I think another one is just awareness, you know, people knowing that heat pumps are now available that work in cold weather, that work well, and yeah, are, you know, and well, there's certainly a bunch of, I've actually just been looking into it for my house, and the amount of rebates available make it pretty attractive now. But also things like gas cooking, like being aware that induction is, you know, actually preferred by chefs and things like that could, I think, help people maybe move away from gas. Who's left?
Thanks, Amy.
Jennifer or the other Ryan? Who's Jennifer?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I'll go, and I'll apologize because I'm driving from another meeting. So I'm gonna need someone else to pass for me. Because I can't read the list. I'm also new to this committee, so thanks for letting me jump in. I'm gonna echo what Amy said. I also feel like it's a combination of awareness and cost, but almost a misperception about cost, because I think some of these options are more affordable than people assume, especially if you can find rebates and other supports that bring the cost to an individual down.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Let's hear from David and then Ryan McKay.
Yeah, David Klein. I'm also in Boulder, and my feeling is a slightly different flavor of what some others have said about cost. I'm thinking financing, and that's something that I think they didn't put in the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. Was financing. They put some subsidies in for a lot of these things, but financing is another thing that could lower further barriers if you don't have to come up with the cash.
Thanks,
And
David.
also, I'm a newbie, so hi.
Oh, great. Welcome. Nice to have so many new people today. Oh, wait, did we just lose Ryan McKay? Did we just lose Ryan? Oh, no, there you are. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm also a newbie. I don't know exactly what the question was because I kind of dialed in late, but I'm just a big advocate of heat pumps. I've been in HVAC for a couple of years now, so looking to get more of them installed. Just trying to be an advocate, and I guess it's kind of a I think there's an education challenge to educate people why they're better. I'm an engineer by trade, so efficiency is kind of in my blood. So I'm just, super excited to see anytime there's a COP greater than 1, it seems like magic, but yeah, it's pretty exciting. So
Great, and welcome. I know we haven't heard from Laurent yet, but did everybody else get to introduce themselves? I think so. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Laurent for his presentation, and then there will be some time for Q&A. So if you have questions, you're also welcome to put them in the chat too, and Laurent or I will flag those. And I also just wanted to say the notes, we have a note stock here. If anybody, I know there are a couple of new folks, I'm just going to link that back in. If you want to take a look at what we've been talking about in this committee space, that this is where we track that. So I'll just put that there too. But anyway, Laurent, let me pass it over to you. And thank you so much for being with us today. So maybe you could introduce yourself, and then we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Well, hi, everybody. Nice to meet you and see familiar faces. I'm a solar thermal contractor under the name of Capital Solar Energy. We've been around for 40 years. And so for 40 years, we've been giving thoughts to how to heat with something else than gas and do it in a way that has enough cost attractivity that some people at least can pull the trigger and move away from gas. Lately, of course, we've been, we're also a master plumber company, and we've been looking more and more at heat pumps as the air source variety has gotten seemingly a lot better of an option and has a real role to play moving forward. So I don't know that I'll be able to answer all your questions. I don't come at this as, hey, I'm a real expert in heat pumps and I can answer all your questions. I think anybody who does that right now, I'd be a little skeptical because there's a lot of new aspects still being worked out with heat pumps. And what I will do is I want to do two things. One, I want to give you a comparison of costs on various heating methods. And two, I just want to talk about the challenges we're running into as a contractor who is interested in moving into heat pumps, but is running into just some constraints that have yet to be fully worked out. And I also want to say how much I love 350. Whenever we sell systems to people who are referred by or come through 350, we're happy to give the organization 3.5% of the sales. And Deb has sat with me in multiple meetings that really influenced our state and at the time nascent Polis administration, and led to the passage of bills, a heat pump bill and a demand side management bill, both of which are going to give far greater Excel incentives moving forward to anything that offsets gas heating, anything from attic insulation to thermostats that are programmable to more efficient gas appliances to heat pumps, solar thermal, electric resistance conversions, beneficial electrification in general, if you will. All of those things are going to, so these processes are very slow. They go through years to see the light out of the legislature, but so those bills are signed, they're real. I have, let's see, I have the pen that Governor Polis signed it with right here. It really happens. But now it's entered the regulatory phase. So these two laws are going to be interpreted by the Public Utility Commission. Excel came out batting pretty strongly, trying to refuse to implement the laws correctly. But so anyway, it'll be about a year process to work this out through the demand side management strategic issues docket that is just starting at the commission. So that's on that front. And that's in addition to any federal or municipal or county rebates that you might see around there, these DSM rebates. So that's just wanted to say that, and thank 350 again for his contribution in making these bills happen. This is a big deal. We're probably the first state with laws like this in the whole country. All right, now Deb, if you wouldn't mind projecting this little Excel spreadsheet I cooked up for today. So here, this is all you're going to get from me in terms of visuals today, is this chart. And what I've tried to do is just kind of lay out the cost per kilowatt hour of heat delivered into your an application, maybe domestic hot water or space heating being the two most common applications, but this would be true for a hot tub or a pool or anything else that really goes for heat in somebody's house. So the starting point, is kind of the old gas appliance that you're going to find in a lot of historic situations, people who just, they have the gas forced air furnace or the gas water heater that they've had for some decades that's in their house. That unit is probably working at a 65% efficiency, meaning when you burn gas in it, about 65% of that burnt gas and heat ends up in the hot water you're trying to heat or the forced air you're trying to heat, and about 35% comes out the flue and is entirely wasted. Okay, that's kind of an old-fashioned gas appliance. Then in the next column, I put the price per therm. So that's very hard to know what price to go on, okay? Historically, the average over the last, say, 10 years has been about 70 cents a therm, if you look at your Excel bills. Right now, I was surprised to discover just a week ago, analyzing my Excel bill, that they had increased it crazily. They had multiplied it by at least threefold to something like $2.10 per therm. And this is supposedly linked to the Texas debacle last year, where all hell froze over and somehow our utility can't plan in advance as gas supply or negotiate gas contracts. It's kind of a nebulous thing there at Excel, how they buy gas. And as soon as you ask questions in docket, they tell you that it's confidential and don't answer the question. But what's for sure is on my bill is $2.10. And then on the third line, I tried to guess what a reasonable estimate moving forward might be. So then in the next column, I expressed that in kilowatt hours. So kilowatt hours and therms are both energy quantities. Gas is sold in therms historically in the US, which is 100,000 British thermal units. Electricity is sold in kilowatt hours, but to be able to compare apples to apples today, I'm going to express everything in kilowatt hours. So when you translate the price per therm in the previous column into a price per kilowatt hour, you get the prices you see in this column. Historically, 2-some cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, seemingly above 7 cents, and probably moving forward, an average is something like 5 cents. Mind you, these are just prices. None of them include the external cost of fracked gas, which is socialized at random on the population, because apparently when it comes to fossil fuels, we're a communist country. So then the final column is the next cost, the net cost per kilowatt hour. So for example, if you take the first line there, if the gas costs 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour, and the efficiency of the appliance is only 65%, then the net cost of the gas that is transformed into heat used in your house is 2.4 divided by 65%, or 3.7 cents, as you see in that column. So that's kind of, that's been the historic benchmark that everything gets compared to as you look at other technological solutions. Is, historically, the cost of gas, delivered heat cost from gas into a house has been around 3.5-4 cents per kilowatt hour of energy. Right now, it's much higher. It's around 11 cents. This is a first. I've been doing this for decades. This is the first time I can say this. It's frankly, for solar thermal contractors or anybody who's trying to look at clean heating as a contractor, that's the best news and help we can get is high gas prices. So we love it. We don't know how long it'll last at this price. Excel is once again at the commission trying to increase gas prices, but we figure a lot of these are riders to amortize the spikes they had in Texas, and we don't really know where it'll go. So that leads me to the final line there is where you see the 0.79, so or 7.9, call it 8 cents per kilowatt hour of heat from gas on old appliances. That's probably a pretty good, reasonable estimate, at least for me as a contractor. If I go out there in the community and try to entice people to move towards other heating sources, that would be about, it would seem like a fair way for me to say, okay, here's what you're currently paying with your old gas appliance. Then the next three lines are the same thing, but with a best-in-class appliance working at 95% efficiency. So there I'll go straight to the last column. You see historically with a 95% gas efficient appliance, people have been paying something like 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour of delivered heat into their house. And that can be, when I say the house, it could be into the forced air system, it could be into the boiler hydronic system, it could be into the domestic hot water tank. It doesn't matter. Then right now, we're paying threefold the price, right? Due to this gas price spike. So people are paying 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And probably moving forward, my best guesstimate is taking 5.5 or 5.4 as a cost of delivered kilowatt hours from gas. Seems like a reasonable estimate. Okay, so now we're going to look at other, well, I guess the next line is also traditional. So this is just, if we did, because there are people out there who don't have natural gas in more remote parts of the state, they're heating with propane or with electricity. And so on propane tends to vary. To make it simple, you know, its price mirrors the price of gasoline. It goes up and down pretty parallel and pretty even to gasoline prices. So counting, you know, sort of guesstimated long-term cost of propane at $2.50, then people are paying 9 cents per kilowatt hour from that source of energy, even with a very high efficiency gas appliance. And then finally, the other thing people are doing in rural areas, as well as sometimes in just pockets of Lakewood, for example, where I live, where there are no gas lines, people have historically been heating with electric resistance, which you see on line 16. So an electric resistance is, you know, the most simple one everybody knows is the electric cook stove or you know, electric burners there that you just heat up. So that's efficient. You know, it takes electricity, it converts virtually all of it into heat. But it's also expensive because the price of the electricity is above 11 cents in Excel turf. So that's kind of your benchmarks of what's out there historically for heating. And then on the next three lines, we're going to talk about more modern solutions. So now this is the big, you know, popular technology, let's say this year, the one getting a lot of attention, which are air source heat pumps. So what is a heat pump? A heat pump is a compressor. We all have one in the house in our fridge. It's capable of taking heat from one place, compress it into higher temperature heat, and put it somewhere else. So in the case of the fridge, it's compressing low temperature heat from the inside of your fridge and dumping it outside of the fridge into your house. Okay, and so these heat pumps have evolved a lot, wonderfully so. And now you can have a heat pump mounted outside your house, as I think you all know, which is capable of heating your house in the heating season and cooling it in the summer. You can think of an air source heat pump a little bit as an AC system running in reverse. That's very close to accurate. And so these heat pumps are reaching 300% accuracies, but that's when it's not too cold outside. A lot of the heating load in Colorado occurs with cold temperatures in the winter nights, where the heat pump efficiency falls to 200 and below. So this is also kind of a guess of mine. It may be a little bit, the average may be a little less than 240%, but probably somewhere between 200 and 250%. I didn't do complex math to calculate this, but say on average, they end up working at 240% efficiency, or a COP of 2.4 in geothermal terms. And you're consuming electricity at the same price of 11.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, that means the delivered cost to heat into your house falls to under 5 cents per kilowatt hour. That's pretty good. And if you compare it with a best-in-class gas appliance, you're seeing that it's a little lower than my long-term estimate based on my long-term guess on gas prices. And it's actually significantly cheaper than what Excel is charging this month for gas heating at 7.5 cents. Now, one thing I wanted to point out on heat pumps, the domestic hot water heating type, beware that there are two technologies, there are two setups. One is they suck heat out of your mechanical room. And two is there are pipes of air intake and exhaust into the compressor using air from the outdoors. That's the one you want. If you do it, make sure you're sucking heat from the outdoors, not from inside your house. If you suck heat from inside your house, then you'll have to pay to reheat your house as well. So that can be kind of misleading. You know, you would think the heat pump's working at 300% efficiency all the time because it's using heat from inside your house. Well, that's true, but now you got to make up for that heat. And since our climate in Colorado is that we heat about 8 months of the year, that's not good. Then you have to, so, you know, you either have another heat pump to heat your house that's going to double the cost of the domestic hot water heat pump, or worse, you have a more conventional heating method for your space heating, and that heat you sucked into your hot water, you're going to pay a pretty penny to put it back in your house. So again, that works very nicely, but make sure you get the duct type that's using air from outside of the house at the very least during the heating season, if you're going to heat hot water that way. Next is the geothermal heat pump. So geothermal, you know, is a huge investment compared to air source heat pumps because in addition to the compressing technology, you have to drill deep underground and install loops under the ground. So that's a significant investment in the tens of thousands of dollars. It's very hard to retrofit in existing buildings without making a huge mess of the yards. So it's generally more attractive on new construction where, you know, the land is already churned up anyway. But the beauty of geothermal heat pumps is that they pump heat from deep underground where there's a stable temperature around 55 degrees. And it's much easier to pump heat out of solid dirt at 55 degrees than it is out of the fluffy air in my backyard, varying between 70 and 10 degrees on the winter days and nights. So because of that, geothermal is going to have a constant efficiency around 300% on the compressor. In other words, its best-in-class performance is going to be its performance all the time, whereas the air source heat pump is going to work at 300% efficiency sometimes, but when it's super cold out, its efficiency may fall to 100 or 150%. So with that, on a geothermal system, you would have an even lower cost of the heat into your house, around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And finally, I put the technology that we tend to specialize in historically, solar thermal or solar hot water, people call it sometimes. So that doesn't use a compressor pump. It uses a simple little circulator pump. If you want to understand the difference between the forces of a circulator pump and a compressor pump, try to think of the difference between throwing a golf ball or a tennis ball forward and then pressing it into your hand so you compress it to a third of its volume. It's very different forces. So on solar thermal, it's just a pump that moves liquids around. And in this case, it moves liquids essentially from a solar storage tank through solar heat boxes on the roof and picks up heat that way. And so, you know, to be consistent, I expressed it as this 9,800% efficiency. I think a more intuitive way to think of this is that a geothermal heat pump is 3 times efficient. You know, in other words, it uses about 30% of the heat it delivers. It uses to power its compressor, about a third of it, where solar thermal uses 1 or 2% of the heat it delivers to circulate liquids around. So with that, you know, of course, you get an extremely low cost per compared to the energy usage of the pump. Basically, it has no cost. You know, it's a tenth of a penny there per kilowatt hour. And then these are the costs of the energy to operate these systems. Of course, this has nothing to do with the cost of installing. Unfortunately, the cost of installing is a little bit inverse to this, meaning, well, the old gas appliance is already there, doesn't cost anything. The best-in-class gas appliance, well, the gas line is already there, and the setup and the space. So, you know, when people call us in a pickle because their boiler failed or something, usually there isn't really time to rerun electric wiring, etc., before the house freezes. So they just wants to replace with a like appliance of better efficiency, usually. Electric resistance, that's, you know, and propane are situations that exist out there, but people aren't trying to actively convert to that usually. Although we're seeing some using electric resistance as a backup to other things like solar thermal or heat pumps in order to fully turn off their gas and have that great pleasure of calling Excel and saying, I'd like you to turn off the meter at my property. Bye-bye, gas. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to, and Deb, you can leave the screen up if people find that useful, or you can go back to showing my mug, I guess. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure you guys heard on these various technologies in terms of price comparison. And so to finish, you know, the cost of installing heat pumps is typically, air source heat pump is typically greater than just replacing with a more efficient gas appliance. The cost of installing geothermal is extremely high in retrofits and still significantly higher. You know, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars more on new construction. And then solar thermal systems range from around $10,000 for something that would do 90% of somebody's domestic hot water to $25,000, $30,000 to systems that would do the majority of people's heating. Knowing solar thermal can never do 100%. If you have a few days of bad weather with snow and whatnot, the solar tank will run out. There is no solar energy coming in, and you have to have some kind of backup. May it be gas or electric resistance or heat pump. Something has to back up the solar thermal when it's too cold out or just too snowy. Yeah.
Laurent, I just want to say thank you so much. And I did put a link to the spreadsheet in the chat if anybody wanted to reference that. I'm wondering, Laurent, I want to be respectful of your time. Are you able to stay with us for a bit longer to go over questions that folks have? Okay. So since we're not too big of a group, I think we can just open it up for some questions. And I know there were some questions in our note stock that people had compiled. So we'll go to those next if folks here don't have any. But does anyone have any questions for Laurent? I know today we were really focusing in on the cost, but I know you're an expert in lots of other areas relative to heat pumps too. Is that you raising your hand, JT?
Yeah. So Laurent, what would you say is the average price range to do a heat pump, you know, replacement for a home, a condo, anything in that sense?
You know, I'm sorry to disappoint you there, but I feel uncomfortable answering that in a blanket way. But I would say, okay, so here's something that I'll give you an example. Here's what happened to me recently, okay? I have the board member of a prominent enviro who calls me and wants to get off gas. And I go to his house and I look at installing a heat pump, and it appears his electric circuitry in the house is not adequate. It's an older house, downtown Denver. And so now we have to send an electrician, and the electrician says, yep, I have to upgrade the electric panel to the house from whatever, 100 amps to 300 amps or something. And then I have to run 220 wires from this new electric panel with high amperage, fat copper wires to the mechanical area to power electric resistance backups to the heat pumps and run more 220 outdoors to where the heat pump is going to be located outside. And to do that, I have to destroy about 150 feet long trench through drywall in various walls of the house to run these cables. And at this point, the board member, who, again, I mean, this is a gentleman who is financially at ease. It's not a problem of paying for this. And someone who's highly motivated environmentally, since he's been serving 10 years on the board of a big enviro. And at the end of the process, his wife said, you know what, hon, I don't want 150 feet of destruction through the drywall in the house. That's a mess. We're going to be having to hire a drywall guy and a painter. It's going to last 6 months. It's going to be a nightmare. Are you sure we need to do this? And so he backed out. He backed out, felt like he'd revisit it later. So that's, things can, one of the objective challenges for sure with heat pumps is it's not just about getting an HVAC contractor over to install the heat pump. It's also figuring out a switch of the house from, I mean, most people don't realize this, but electric loads on a traditional house, you got about a quarter in electric loads, a quarter in hot water heating loads, and half in space heating loads. That's the energy pattern. Now with heat pumps, you decrease those loads, arguably, for sure. You cut the heat loads by a factor of 3, thanks to the efficiency of the heat pumps, but it's still, you're doubling the total electric usage of the house, roughly, and you're more than doubling peak loads, because when you got that Murphy's Law scenario, it's 10 degrees outdoors, everybody's now on heat pumps, you're going to have hundreds of amps going to those heat pumps at that moment in the night when renewable energy generation is low and the grid's saturated. And so it also has, if our whole society switches to heat pumps, we have to understand it's also going to require massive investments on the utility side of the meter to revisit the wires that they send to all our neighborhoods and have fatter wires capable of dealing with significantly higher peaks of loads.
Thanks, Laurent. And I see David has a question. I just quickly before your question, David, I wanted to just point folks to the chat. Ron had dropped the information on the piece of legislation that Laurent was referring, that we 350 Colorado collaborated and supported Laurent in that process. That I just wanted folks to see that, especially since we have a couple of new folks on the call. That's linked in the chat if folks wanted to see this piece of legislation that is unlike, I think you said there isn't another piece of legislation that has been passed like this in the country. Is that right, Laurent?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. Yeah. So just interesting for folks who are just tuning in. Okay, David, your question.
So the wrap you just gave, Laurent, is a wonderful illustration of something I learned, when I did just a little bit of work on energy efficiency in the residential sector a long time ago in my previous job, is that retrofits are hard, right? That's you can say it in 3 words. So, if you're like me and you live in an old quirky house with an existing, probably not necessarily even typical heating system, what I'd want to do if I were thinking about, okay, how am I going to get off gas? I'd want somebody to come in and look at the whole thing and say, okay, there's options, right? And for this particular house, you know, if you went this way, it would look a certain way. If you went, you know, if you went with air source, it might look a different way. If you went with geothermal heat pump, it might look a different way. And here's where you could dig the holes, you know. Are there people out there in that business?
Yeah, there are not as many as I'd like to see, but I think this really points to in my opinion, what's going to be the real solution in this isn't an HVAC contractor just coming to install a heat pump in isolation, but more likely somebody who acts as a general contractor who comes in and says, okay, we're going to caulk your windows and maybe change the aluminum windows in your basement. We're going to beef up the insulation of your walls, find some clever way to inject some foam in the walls or blow some stuff in your attic. And we're going to pull out your gas appliances, your stove, your hot water heater, and your forced air furnace. Replace it with an induction stove and a new set of pots and pans for you in the kitchen. Replace the gas furnace with a heat pump with perhaps an electric resistance backup. Replace the hot water heater with a solar thermal system and electric resistance backup, or some combo of these technologies, and redo your electric wiring to 21st century standards with a significantly larger electric panel and run the right 220 wires to the right places in the house. And we're going to do this whole project for $50,000, and you're going to get rid of your gas entirely. You can get $25,000 of help from a combination of federal incentive, your wonderful town rebates, and your wonderful utility, which has been forced to be wonderful by many forces, including 350. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a bill of, you know, something like $20,000, but you're going to be in a completely renovated house on many aspects: windows, caulking, air leaks, attic and wall insulation, new electric appliances, no more gas line, better air quality, the whole 9 yards. And so that, in my opinion, is the way we really need to move forward. And it's complicated and it's not completely available there, but between the increases in gas prices and all the excitement around heat pumps, I believe we will soon have more contractors walking around like this.
Thank you, Laurent. And actually, thank you. I don't know if you go by Nick or Nicholas, but Nicholas just put a link in the chat about a company having success as a general contractor for EE upgrades. Looks like that might be in San Francisco. I'm not sure. SF Homes. But anyway, thank you, Nicholas. Does anyone else have any resources, similar resources to share with the group? You could put them in the chat or speak up.
I should, I mean, I kind of hate to admit this, but I want to be honest at the same time. So although we've installed a few geothermal systems and heat pumps, it's not our core expertise at this point. And we thought we'd be installing more this fall, but between supply issues with specific heat pump models, undecided clients who are also confronted to, as I explained, you know, a more complex string of decision than they first thought, and the fact that we're in that this is our high season, you know, that this is, as a heating contractor, I think it's the same for everybody in HVAC, boiler, plumbing, solar, thermal, and heat pumps. The fall is the time when a lot of people have heating their house on the brain, and they call us and they want service and they want new systems, etc. So for this fall, what we've decided to do is kind of not really offer heat pumps, focus on our traditional solar thermal systems, and revisit heat pumps when things calm down a little bit in the new year, when we're a little slower for one, and we're, you know, a little more eager to find new work, but also just have time to breathe and consider things that are a little new to us and that aren't how can I say, I guess you can think of it in terms of profitability simply, you know, we're a small contractor. We know how to install solar thermal system. We have all the steps and the productivity figured out. Where on heat pumps, we know we're gonna do multiple trips and, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, if not a little bit of moonwalking at time.
So thank you, Laurent. And Ron just put Boulder County's Energy Smart link in the chat. And that was another one that was on my mind too, just as a potential resource. So thanks, Ron. And Laurent, would you mind putting your both your email and a link to your website in the chat too, just in case folks want to learn a little bit more?
Okay.
Okay.
I think I'm
Oh, and actually I can do, actually, you know what, don't you worry about it. I'll do that since you're answering questions.
okay.
I'm wondering, does anybody else have a top of mind question for Laurent? Otherwise, we'll look at the note stock for some of the questions that were identified.
I've got a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead. Yeah,
It-
go ahead, Amy.
If someone has already like a ducted air conditioning system, is a heat pump kind of a drop-in, or is it still potentially
Yes.
complicated?
No, that part is pretty simple. Again, a heat pump is basically an AC that runs in reverse, right?
Right.
It's kind of a similar compressor, but instead of compressing heat out of your house to throw in the hot air outside, it's compressing heat out of the cold air outside, putting it into your house. So because the loads are pretty similar, if you already have an AC, it is one of the easier scenarios where a contractor can come in, remove your AC unit and replace it with quote unquote an AC unit that can work forward and backward, if you will, and deliver heat into your house. You probably have the right amperage. Sometimes it does still require some upgrades, but you probably have the right amperage to use your AC wires. And your AC box platform outside can probably also work to house the heat pump. So yes, that's a real advantage if you already have AC.
Thanks, Laurent.
I have
Did anyone else? Oh, yeah,
question.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm trying to construct a even crude mental model for how these heat pumps work, and in the process get some context on the efficiency numbers that you specified in your spreadsheet.
Sure.
So is it somewhat fair to say that this heat pump is more or less like the way refrigerator works, where, you know, in this case, I guess the refrigerator is your outside, and everything outside of the refrigerator is now your inside?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Where would the efficiency of a refrigerator pump fit in on, you know, in the context of the efficiencies you posted, or an air conditioning unit?
I think a fridge would be pretty close to the functionment of a standard air source heat pump. I know there's another contractor on the call who may know more about fridges than I do, and I welcome your input as well. But my understanding is, yeah, you're pumping heat out of the air in your fridge and throwing it into the air outside your fridge. So it's going to work pretty similarly. So if I can explain this a little bit better, heat pumps, the way these compressors work is really you use a state change. So I think most of us have had this experience where, I don't know, you're coming out of the pool in Phoenix, Arizona in July. It's 100 degrees outdoors. And all of a sudden, as you step out of the pool, you have a minute where you feel chilly. And that minute is when the water on your skin is evaporating. When the water evaporates, when it changes from liquid to gas, a tremendous amount of energy is required for that state change. It's something like the same energy you need to heat water by 150 degrees is the amount of energy you need to states change. And so that's how these compressor pumps operate. They're cleverly designed loops where a fluid is going to change from gas to liquid back and forth. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here. Plus, I'm not an expert at this. But through the state change, you're able to have large amounts of energy that get absorbed or released out of this fluid. And that's really how you facilitate these heat transfers from, which may seem otherwise counterintuitive, you know.
Okay, so, and the phase change in this case is that of the water in the air.
Well,
Humidity
there
or
is
something
always a contained pressurized liquid loop in the compressor pump. That's really what the compressor pump is moving around, is this liquid loop. And so it's mostly, you know, I should say fluid loop because it's mostly liquid, but it does states change to gas somewhere in the loop and then recondenses into liquid. And so when it condenses from gas to liquid, it sucks in a lot of energy to do that. Sorry, it gives, I'm saying that backwards. Yeah, it releases a lot of energy or heat in this case. And then when it does the opposite, when it changes from liquid to gas, it sucks in a lot of energy and therefore cools what's around that little loop.
Okay.
Could I just jump in real quick? I have had like a recurring thought with a lot of these technologies is that you know, a lot of these problems we're trying to solve are not technical problems. You know, we have heat pump technology. We know how to insulate houses. We know how to install windows. But the barrier is more of a financial problem that we need to solve. Like the example you showed with the board member that balked at a big price tag. And I think we need to like explore and promote some more innovative financing models. And one of them is a pay-as-you-save model, where you pay nothing up front, and then you like that. And then as you start to save money, you use those savings to repay the cost of the hardware that was installed. And there's actually a group that's trying to get a bill passed, or trying to get a bill into legislation. I don't know if 350 is supporting that or not, but it seems really attractive. And I think that would just unleash like a tidal wave of people wanting to do these projects if it was zero out of pocket and you pay as you save. And then another funding pathway is the Renew loan, which is like really low interest rate loans that you can get for home improvement. And I think, you know, educating people about heat pumps is one thing, and it's super cool technology and it's flashy and it's, you know, super cool, but financing is kind of boring. But I think that's kind of the keystone to getting a lot of these projects off the ground.
Thank you,
I
Ryan.
agree.
Yeah, Ryan, I was going to ask if you have anything easy to pop in the chat for us. I think this is a group that would be interested. So feel free to drop anything. It looks like you just did. Awesome. Laurent, did you want to say anything about Ryan's comment? Otherwise, I'll move us along. We have a couple other things on the agenda too.
The easy thing is I approve this message.
Right. Yes. So we have just a couple of wrap-up things on our agenda, but I want to acknowledge that there were tons of questions that the committee had come up with, and I know we're only scratching the surface here. We have time for, let's say, like one more question for Laurent, or Laurent, if you have any closing.
I did read the questions. I think between what I volunteered up front and the questions we've just gone through, I believe most of the points have at least been touched on.
Okay, great.
Answered in great detail.
Thank you. I didn't have a chance to look at them all in depth. I was just like, oh my goodness, so many. So thank you for taking a look at those. Any last question for Laurent before we wrap up with our action items and upcoming events and so on? Okay, well, Laurent, thank you so much. As always, it's great to collaborate with you, and we appreciate your expertise and everything you're doing in this space. And yeah, let's give Laurent a little like, yay. We'd be clapping for you if we were in person.
Okay. Well,
so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And beware, I think in your list of announcements, there is supposed CRAS events. And I just learned before this call that that event was canceled for tonight.
Oh,
in,
okay.
at
Well,
the Boulder Crest chapter.
I was
no.
just about to mention that, so thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll get
so no
rescheduled.
event tonight. Okay. Laurent, thank you
All right.
again. Feel free to jump off if you need to. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay, but thank you.
Cheers.
Yes, okay, so I wanted to just give a little space to a call to action. So for those who are able, this is all in the note stock, but there's an opportunity to testify for community choice energy in Colorado. So it's often referred to as the CCE study bill. It's HB 1269. So there are some opportunities to testify. It looks like the hearing is next Tuesday, the 18th on Zoom. So we are inviting all of you. So if you're on this call and you're looking for ways to get involved and take action, this is one really clear way. And everything you need to know about testifying is here in the notes. And we're also inviting you to share this with your networks. So feel free to share and invite other people to testify. There are also just a couple of notes in here about what to talk about. And in the notes, there is a mention of a CCE one pager. I don't know, I'm wondering if anybody who's been attending these meetings regularly has access to that CCE one pager that we can somehow link to or share out. If not, what I'll do is I'll have Alyssa send a follow-up email to the whole committee list with a link to that one pager. Okay, it sounds like nobody has that right now. But anyway, so for those who are thinking about testifying and able to, we have more info for you so that you can be totally prepared to make some comments. So there's a link to sign up, and it would just be a 2-minute statement. And I think that's all about just that particular call to action. Does anyone else know more about that or have anything to add about that call to action?
Yeah, I'm pretty involved in that one.
Yeah.
And the word on the street is particularly helpful if people can testify from a perspective that is not Boulder centric. So if you're in a community that is not Boulder, your testimony will weigh twice as much in this matter.
I know we have a number of Boulder people on here, but I think we have a bunch of people who aren't in Boulder on here too. So that's good to know. Thank you, Laurent. And I hear that a lot with efforts that we're involved in.
Is Boulder County outside of Boulder useful or just outside Boulder County?
Yeah, just use another word than Boulder. Say
Okay.
I live
Yeah, that's
in
true.
the countryside.
Yeah. Rural Boulder County, I don't know. Okay, thank you for that tip. Okay, so it looks like the meeting tonight is canceled. So I'll just make a note of that in case anyone is checking notes later. It looks like on October 22nd, we have a net zero home tour in Gun Barrel. There aren't any details in the notes, but I'm guessing Alyssa will send out more information on that, but just mark your calendar if you want to do that. That will be in Gun Barrel, which is just outside of Boulder on October 22nd. And then I wanted to just also let people know the upcoming Renewable Energy Committee meetings are now on Wednesdays at this time going forward, not every Wednesday, but monthly. So November 9th, we'll be talking about EVs and public transportation with Julia, she's definitely done webinars and presentations for us before. On December 12th, we'll have someone from Passive House Energy coming to present. I'm not sure if that's an organization or someone who's going to talk about Passive House Energy. And then in January, we'll be talking about solar EVs and having a presentation on that. So I just wanted to give folks, especially since we have some new folks, just a forecast of what's coming up and what we'll be diving into. And I know we are at the 30-minute mark, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thanks for being here today. If you need to hop right off, hop right off. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions for folks. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Deb. I have
Yeah.
the one pager, the CCE one pager. I found it in my email, but it's a PDF file. I can't seem to upload it to the chat or anything. So I
Okay.
can email it or?
Yeah, Ron, if you could email it to me, I'll make sure that when Alyssa sends out an action alert, we can send a link to it.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laurent. Thanks, Deb.
Yeah, thanks
everybody,
everybody.
for
Good to see
joining.
y'all.
Thanks.
Deb, if you have
Bye.
a minute, there's one thing I'd like to put on your radar.
Sure.
And I don't know how this will translate into action or actual interventions, but 350 should be made aware of this. Xcel Energy has moved a lot of its rate structure on electricity to time of use rates. And these time of use rates are based on Xcel's historic generation that, you know, they have too much electricity at night from their coal plants or things like that. And so they've structured rates in a way that push people to consume electricity when it is not made from renewable energy. Okay. And this problem's going to get worse and more complex as things move forward. For instance, as we move electric cars into the grid instead of gasoline ones out of the grid, when are we going to charge those cars? Well, right now, a homeowner who would look at their time of use rate is going to conclude that they should charge at night when the sun don't shine. Not good.
Yeah.
Same with heat pumps and whatnot. There is some level of, so for space heating, less so, but for hot water heating, are you going to heat your hot water right after you use the hot water? So at 7:30 a.m. or something after your shower? Or are you going to heat the hot water when the grid has extra sun and solar energy coming in at, I don't know, perhaps 3 p.m.? Okay, and how does that get decided and all? So these things can get pretty complicated, but what I wanted to introduce you to is this idea of time of renewables, which would be a rate structure kind of like time of use, but instead of basing it on Xcel's historic coal and gas generation, base it on when the sun and the wind are active in providing virtually free energy to the system. That's really one you want to move loads towards that through both time of renewable rates systems and smarter grid controls that also participate in doing that. And, you know, like one simple, easy to understand example is how about when there's too much sun at 3 p.m., Xcel takes controls of people's electric water heater and adds 20 extra degrees in there because otherwise the energy is wasted. You know, that's one thing they could do. And so, yeah, Xcel is playing a dirty game with this, partly out of laziness, partly out of just plain old resistance. But they're not being helpful in this, quite the opposite in the demand side management docket where they're to interpret our hard-won laws. They're basing a lot of their input on this Brattle study that they commanded. But the Brattle study, they told Brattle to assume that electric vehicles would charge at night, for instance. And so, yeah, it's a topic that will become more prominent in years to come. We have to align our demand with when we have free, clean energy as much as possible. And Xcel is not doing that so far.
Wow, thank you for flagging that, Laurent. Do you see any immediate calls to action around this, or just something for us to be keeping in mind as we continue our activism around these issues?
Perhaps just a call to action for you, Micah, to participate in the call organized by KK Duvivier. And she is actively involved in this. She has some law students at DU that are looking at legal ways to structure time of renewable rates. And there's going to be more and more exploration of this between, my guess is, you know, the usual culprits of enviros and renewable energy groups on one side, and hopefully the help of Paulus's energy office as well. But yeah, it's an important topic and it'll have meaningful implications moving forward.
Thanks for flagging that. And I just made a note about the call, the call that KK organizes, so I'll flag that. I know we're after time. Does anyone else have any other final thoughts before we close?
Deb, I was at least hoping to have a short exchange with you.
Sure. I can
don't-
stay
I can-
on. Yeah.
Sure.
I can stay on. Okay, thanks,
Talk to you guys
everybody.
soon.
Yeah, see you next time.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Good to see you in person, sort of.
Yeah,
rather
I think
than
you and I emailed, right? Were you one of the people that was trying to join at the old call time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so
Exactly.
sorry about that.
Yeah,
We
it's
just
okay.
had, in fact, oh my gosh, you're reminding me. I think we still have to update that in a few places. I'm making
Yeah,
myself
so
a note about
it's a
that. Yeah.
combination of I mean, I'm really new into this stuff, and I don't remember exactly how much I explained to you via email, but so a little bit of a combination of me being new and trying to figure out where everything fits in on my calendar, and perhaps
Mhm.
you guys needing to update yours a bit as well, but that's okay. I'm glad I made it to this one. I think, I don't know, it might be worth, I have basically no idea what I'm doing here yet, but this is my earliest attempts in trying to sort of get some direction and new understanding and new perspective, and sort of see where I can fit in. And I guess one thing I noticed today is that I felt compelled to ask some like scientific questions. I'm a scientist by background, if you will. So I find myself really intrigued by sort of the way